I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this. My name is Mike, and I used to believe I had a pretty solid marriage. Sarah, my wife, and I had been together for almost 8 years. We met in college, and I'll admit it was a classic love story. We were inseparable from the moment we met. At least, that's what I thought. We built a life together, shared dreams, and even adopted a cute little dog named Benny. Things seemed perfect, but somewhere along the way I started noticing cracks. At first, it was subtle. Sarah became more distant, and I figured it was just stress from her job. She worked as a marketing manager, and her boss had recently pressured her to take on more responsibilities. I tried to be supportive, offering to cook dinner and giving her space when she needed it. But as the months went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She was often on her phone, texting and laughing without bothering to include me in on whatever was so funny. I made excuses for her, telling myself that it was just work-related chatter. But then, there came the late nights. I'd find myself sitting on the couch, watching reruns of old sitcoms while she worked late at the office or claimed to be out with friends from work. She always had some new excuse ready. "You know how it is, Mike. We're launching a new campaign, and it's just crazy right now." I nodded, but the doubts crept in. I couldn't help but wonder if her late nights were more about someone else than work. Then one evening, while Sarah was supposedly at a team-building dinner, I was going through our shared computer to check on our upcoming vacation plans. I stumbled upon a folder labeled Motivational Speaker. It piqued my curiosity, and as I opened it, I found a series of emails exchanged between Sarah and a man named Jason. He was a motivational speaker with a growing following, someone she had recently started listing as her inspiration. At first, I brushed it off as harmless admiration, but then I read one email that struck me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just benign admiration, it was an invitation to meet up after one of his seminars. The way she wrote to him, the flirty tone in her messages, made my stomach churn. I felt a knot form in my throat as I continued to read. Each message cracked the illusion of our happy marriage a little more. The next few days were a blur. I was a man on a mission, piecing together the puzzle of Sarah's recent behavior. I began paying closer attention to her routines, and the more I observed, the more I felt the weight of betrayal harden my chest. I noticed how she dressed up more than usual, spending extra time in front of the mirror. I could hear her on the phone laughing, sometimes in a way that felt too intimate. I tried to confront her gently about it, but she brushed it off, claiming it was just harmless banter with colleagues. But I was not going to let this slide. I needed answers. The moment came when I decided to confront her directly. I had gathered enough evidence from those emails, and I felt a surge of anger and betrayal coursing through my veins. One night, as she settled down on the couch with a glass of wine, I took a deep breath and asked, "Sarah, are you cheating on me?" Her reaction was instantaneous. The look on her face was a mix of shock and disbelief, but beneath that facade I could see the guilt. It felt like everything around us stopped, as if the universe paused to let the weight of my words hang in the air. She stammered for an explanation, weaving a web of lies and excuses that fell apart with each passing moment. "What? No, how could you think that?" she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. But I wasn't buying it. I laid out the evidence, the emails, the late nights, and her new friendship with Jason. Her defenses crumbled. The more she tried to deny it, the clearer it became that she was trying to protect herself rather than our marriage. The anger inside me boiled over, and I watched as she shifted from defensive to manipulative, throwing accusations that I was being paranoid and insecure. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. And in that moment, my heart shattered as she continued to lie straight to my face. I felt anger bubble within me, a toxic cocktail of betrayal and hurt. It felt like my life was crashing down, and I couldn't comprehend how things had spiraled so far out of control. As I stared at her, I wanted to scream, to shake her and make her understand the pain she was causing. Instead, a calmness washed over me as I realized this moment was just the beginning of something bigger, a turning point. What I didn't know then was that the betrayal would spark something in me that I never knew existed, a desire to grow, to rise above the wreckage and to reclaim my life. I would not be a victim in this story. I would become my own success story, and I would leave her in the past. In the days that followed the confrontation, I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions. I was consumed by anger and pain, but strangely, there was also a flicker of resolve growing inside me. I realized I had a choice to make. I could either wallow in self-pity or I could take control of my life. I chose the latter, but first I had to confront the reality of what Sarah had done. There was no way I could ignore the betrayal or pretend it hadn't happened. I spent countless hours replaying our time together, analyzing every moment, every conversation. It felt like I was living in a twisted movie, where the plot twist had left me reeling. I could still remember the way she laughed at my jokes, the way she would curl up next to me on the couch, and how we would talk about our future together. Now, it felt like those memories had been tainted with her infidelity. Eventually, I confronted her again, this time with a firmer stance. "I need you to be honest with me. Are you seeing him?" I asked, knowing full well that the answer would likely break me again. This time she hesitated, and for a brief moment I saw guilt flicker across her face, but she quickly masked it, deflecting with more excuses. "Mike, it's not what you think. We talk about work stuff. He inspires me. You're just being jealous and paranoid." Jealous? No, I was heartbroken. I had trusted her, believed in our marriage, and here she was, trying to manipulate the situation as if I was the problem. It was infuriating. The distinct feeling of betrayal morphed into a new kind of anger, not just anger at her, but anger directed at myself for allowing this to happen. I could feel the walls closing in on me. I had to get away from her. I had to think. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached out to my best friend, Dave. We hadn't spent much time together lately. Life had gotten in the way: marriage, work, obligations. But I needed someone to confide in, someone who would understand the turmoil I was going through. We met at a bar, and as I sipped a whiskey, I poured my heart out to him. I told him everything: the late nights, the lies, the gut-wrenching feeling of betrayal. To my surprise, he listened without judgment. "Mike, I'm so sorry," he said, shaking his head. "You deserve so much better than this. You need to think about what you want." His words rang in my ears. What did I want? I wanted the life I had before: the love, the laughter, the shared dreams. But I also realized that I wanted something more. Now, I wanted to be stronger, to be someone who wouldn't let another person dictate my happiness. I wanted to find my own purpose, my own success story. After that night, I began to take small steps towards regaining control of my life. I signed up for a gym membership and started hitting the weights. It felt good to push my body, to sweat out the frustration and anger. I also started reading self-help books and listening to podcasts about personal growth. I had spent so many years focusing on Sarah's needs, and now it was time to turn that energy inward. I even started journaling, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I wrote about my feelings, my anger, and my hopes for the future. Each entry felt like a small release, a way to let go of the pain Sarah had caused while also building a roadmap for a new beginning. As the weeks passed, I began to transform into someone I didn't recognize, a stronger version of myself. The physical changes were dramatic. I was losing weight, gaining muscle, and honing in on a sense of self that I hadn't felt in years. The emotional changes were even more profound. I began to develop a clearer sense of who I was outside of my marriage. I started thinking about my own dreams, ideas I had shelved for too long. I had always had an interest in writing, and I decided to pursue it. I began drafting short stories and even started a blog to document my journey. But just as I was beginning to feel empowered, Sarah would occasionally reach out. She would send messages filled with concern, claiming she missed the old us. One evening she called me, her voice trembling. "Mike, can we talk? I'm really sorry for everything," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. I was tempted to give her another chance, to believe that the woman I loved was still in there somewhere. Yet each time I heard her voice, I felt that old wound reopen. Instead, I focused on my transformation. I surrounded myself with supportive friends and even joined a group exploring personal development. The more I worked on myself, the more I realized that Sarah's betrayal was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. I was on a path to reclaim my identity, to become someone I could be proud of. And every time I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror, I would smile. I was no longer the man in the shadows of a broken marriage. I was rising from the ashes, determined to create a life that was truly mine. As I began to embrace this new life, I realized that revenge wasn't about inflicting pain on Sarah. It was about thriving without her. I would succeed, not just to prove her wrong, but to prove to myself that I could stand on my own. My journey had just begun, and I was ready to take on whatever came next. As the weeks turned into months, I settled further into my new routine. I was no longer the passive husband Sarah had taken for granted. I had started going out more, reconnecting with friends, and even making new acquaintances at the gym and in writing workshops. It was liberating, and as my self-confidence grew, so did my resolve to move on from Sarah. But despite my outward transformation, I still found myself caught in a web of emotions when it came to her. I had cut off communication as much as possible, but there were moments when I would hear her name mentioned in a conversation or see a photo of us together, and it would bring back a flood of memories, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Each memory was a reminder of the life I had built that was now in ruins. One evening, as I returned home from a workout, I found a letter slipped under my front door. It was from Sarah. My heart raced as I unfolded the paper, her familiar handwriting sending me back to a time when everything felt right. The letter was filled with apologies, not just for the affair but for the years of neglect. She wrote about how she had been lost and how she was seeking help through therapy. She claimed she understood the gravity of her mistakes and was willing to do whatever it took to make amends. Reading her words, I felt a mix of anger and pity. It was so typical of Sarah to turn the situation back to herself. She had hurt me deeply, yet here she was asking for forgiveness as if that would erase the pain. I clenched the letter tightly, my emotions surging. I spent a sleepless night wrestling with my thoughts. Should I forgive her? Could I reconcile with someone who had shattered my trust? The next day I met up with Dave again and I shared the letter with him. His response surprised me. "Mike, you've come so far. Do you really want to go back to that? Just because she's seeking help doesn't mean she's ready to change," he said. "You need to think about yourself first. Do you really want to be with someone who hurt you this way?" His words struck a chord. I had begun to understand my worth and what I wanted from life. I didn't want to return to a situation that had caused me so much pain. I wanted to continue growing, to experience life without the shackles of betrayal weighing me down. In the days that followed, I made a decision. I wrote Sarah a response, pouring out my feelings, but I was firm. I told her that, while I appreciated her letter and her willingness to seek help, I could not entertain the idea of reconciliation. I needed time to heal and I needed to focus on myself. I wished her well but let her know that my heart was no longer in our marriage. When I sent that email, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was choosing my future over my past, and it felt empowering. However, I knew this was only the beginning of my journey. I had made great strides in my personal growth, but I also knew that I had to deal with the emotional aftermath of the betrayal, or it would linger like a shadow over my new life. So, I dove deeper into my passion for writing. I started attending local open mic nights, where I shared my stories and connected with others who had experienced their own struggles. It became a safe space for me to express my feelings and to transform my pain into something creative. Each story I shared was a step toward healing, not just for me but for others who related to the themes of loss, betrayal, and resilience. As I gained confidence on stage, I began to attract a small following. People were drawn to my authenticity, to the rawness of my experiences. I had never considered myself a public speaker, but the more I shared, the more I realized that vulnerability was powerful. It became a way for me to connect with others and build a community around shared struggles. I learned that storytelling could be a healing force, not just for me but for everyone who listened. But just when I thought I was moving on, I received an unexpected message from Sarah again. It was a text, and my heart sank when I saw her name pop up on my phone. I hesitated before opening it, my stomach twisting in knots. The message read, "Can we meet? I need to talk to you in person. It's important." Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep moving forward without looking back. Yet I felt a sense of responsibility to confront this once and for all. I had been doing so well, but I knew that facing her again might either solidify my resolve or unravel the progress I had made. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, a neutral ground where I could control the situation. As I walked in, I spotted her sitting nervously at a corner table, her eyes darting around as if she were afraid to see me. I took a deep breath and approached her, noting the changes in her demeanor. She looked different, a bit more put together, but the signs of anxiety were evident. "Mike, thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity. I wanted to know what she had to say, but I also wanted to guard my heart. "I've been in therapy, and it's helped me realize a lot of things," she began, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I understand now how I neglected you in our marriage. I've been working on myself, and I want to be a better person. I want us to try again." I felt an overwhelming need to laugh, then cry, a cocktail of emotions that left me breathless. This was the same woman who had betrayed my trust, who had thrown away our relationship like it meant nothing. And now she wanted to pick up the pieces like nothing had happened. "Sarah, I appreciate that you're trying to change," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I've changed too. I've grown in ways I never expected, and I don't think going back to what we had is possible. I can't just forget what you did." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I felt a twinge of sympathy. But that quickly faded. I had learned to prioritize my own well-being, and I wasn't going to let her weave her way back into my life just because she felt remorseful now. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but I can't be part of it," I continued, my voice firm. "I'm moving on, and I'm happier now than I have been in a long time." As I left the coffee shop, I felt lighter. I had confronted her and asserted my boundaries. I was taking control of my narrative, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The journey to personal growth was far from over, but I knew I was on the right path. I was reclaiming my life, one step at a time, and with each passing day, I felt more empowered to embrace my future. After that meeting with Sarah, I felt an exhilarating sense of liberation. I had stood my ground and made it clear that there was no going back. I was done with the hurt and manipulation. But even as I celebrated this small victory, I knew the aftermath was still unfolding. It would take more than one conversation to fully sever the emotional ties that bound me to her. In the following weeks, I delved deeper into my writing. I began submitting my short stories to various online platforms, and much to my surprise, I received positive feedback. It felt incredible to share my experiences and to connect with others through storytelling. I found that writing became my sanctuary, a space where I could express my thoughts freely without the constraints of judgment or expectation. During this period of growth, I also took the leap to start a podcast. The idea struck me one day while I was at the gym, listening to motivational speakers share their journeys of overcoming adversity. I realized I could do that too. I could be the voice for others who felt lost, just like I had been. I named it Reclaiming Your Story, and I dedicated it to discussing personal growth, resilience, and healing after betrayal. The first few episodes focused on my journey through the heartbreak, and as I recorded each one, I felt the weight of my past lift a little more with every word. I shared my experiences openly, discussing everything from the emotional turmoil of discovering Sarah's infidelity to the empowering steps I took to rebuild my life. It turned out that many listeners resonated with my story, sharing their own experiences in the process. Each message I received reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, and it fueled my passion even more. As I was building my platform, I also started to reconnect with my own interests outside of the heartbreak. I took up hiking, something I had always wanted to try but never found the time for. There was something incredibly freeing about being out in nature, away from the noise of everyday life. I found solace in the trails, and as I climbed mountains and explored new paths, I felt clarity wash over me. Each step was a reminder of how far I had come and how much stronger I was becoming. But just as it seemed I had settled into a new routine, Sarah would occasionally rear her head like a ghost from the past. She would send messages, sometimes apologetic, other times desperate, trying to reconnect. I had turned off notifications for her texts, but I'd still catch glimpses of her name on my screen when I checked my phone. Each time, my heart would race, a mix of anger and confusion bubbling to the surface. One day, out of the blue, I received a call from an unknown number. A familiar voice answered when I picked up. It was Sarah. "Mike, I need to talk to you. It's important," she said, sounding frantic. I felt my stomach drop. I had told myself I was done with her games, but part of me couldn't help but feel a pull of curiosity. "Sarah, we've been through this. What could possibly be so important now?" I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "Please, just listen. I've been doing a lot of soul searching and I've realized something," she said, her voice shaky. "I've been seeing someone else, Jason. It's over now, and I know that doesn't change what I did, but I need you to know that I've changed." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The infidelity had been a blow, but hearing that she had acted on it with the very man who had taken her from me felt like salt in the wound. Anger flared up inside me. "You think I care about who you're seeing now? You had your chance, Sarah. You threw it away." "I know, and I'm sorry," she said, desperation seeping through her words. "But I've changed. I'm going to therapy, and I really want to work on myself. I just need a friend right now." The idea of being her friend felt absurd. I had spent so much time rebuilding my life, and the last thing I wanted was to be dragged back into her chaotic world. "I can't be that for you," I said, my voice firm. "You need to figure this out on your own. I have my own life now." Her silence on the other end spoke volumes. I could hear the weight of my words sinking in. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything," she finally said, her voice cracking. "I hope you find happiness." I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of emotions. I was angry, hurt, and oddly relieved. I had made it clear I was moving forward, and hearing her confess her struggles gave me an unexpected sense of closure. I had escaped the toxicity of our relationship, and I was ready to embrace the future. Over the next few months, my podcast gained traction. I had begun inviting guests to share their own stories of resilience, and I was continually inspired by their journeys. I received countless messages from listeners expressing gratitude for creating a platform where they felt heard and understood. It was a humbling experience, one that lit a fire in me to keep going. I was not only reclaiming my story, but helping others reclaim theirs. As the podcast flourished, I decided to take the leap and host a live event. I wanted to create a space where people could come together, share their stories, and inspire one another. It was a massive undertaking, but the excitement of it all overshadowed the anxiety I felt. I spent weeks organizing, reaching out to potential speakers, and promoting the event through my social media channels. The day of the event arrived, and I was filled with a mix of nerves and anticipation. As I stepped onto the stage, looking out at the audience, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was about to share my story with a room full of people who had come to hear about healing and growth. As I spoke, I felt a connection with each person in the room, reminding me that we were all in this together. No one was alone in their struggles. The energy in the room was electric. After I shared my story, I opened the floor to questions and discussion. It was incredible to witness people sharing their vulnerabilities, their journeys through heartbreak, and their paths to healing. It was a reminder that we all have our battles, but together, we can lift each other up and emerge stronger. As the evening came to a close, I stepped off the stage, my heart swelling with pride. I had transformed my pain into purpose, and I was helping others do the same. I could feel the weight of my past lifting more and more, and with it, I felt a sense of renewal. Driving home that night, I reflected on how far I had come. I had weathered the storm of betrayal, and now I was standing tall, ready to embrace whatever came next. I had become my own success story, and I was excited to see where this journey would take me. But just as I thought I was moving forward smoothly, a message popped up on my phone, and as I glanced at it, my heart sank. It was from Sarah again. Would this ever end? I had to remind myself that this was just another test, another moment to reclaim my narrative. Whatever she had to say next would not define me. I was, after all, living my truth and forging a path toward my own happiness. As I drove home from the event, my phone buzzed incessantly, pulling my mind back to Sarah's message. The familiar sense of dread washed over me, but I was determined not to let her disrupt the momentum I had built. I took a deep breath and decided to read it, preparing myself for whatever it might contain. Mike, I know I haven't been the best person. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. The podcast is amazing and I've been listening to your episodes. It's inspiring to see you thrive. I wish I could be part of that life again. Can we please talk? The words scratched at a lingering wound, but I couldn't help but feel a flicker of annoyance mixed with curiosity. Proud of me. Did she really think that a few kind words could erase the years of betrayal? I considered this for a moment. There was a time when her approval meant everything to me, but now it felt hollow. I had moved on, or so I thought. But that night I couldn't shake the message from my mind. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. Was she truly trying to be supportive, or was this another attempt to manipulate my emotions? I had spent months focusing on my own healing, and I wasn't about to allow her back into my life without some serious reflection. The next day, I decided to talk it over with Dave again. We met for lunch at a local diner, the familiar clatter of dishes and chatter providing a comforting backdrop as I shared Sarah's message. What do you think? I asked, searching for clarity. Is it just more of her trying to get back into my life? Dave leaned back in his chair, considering his response. It sounds like she feels the weight of what she did and maybe she genuinely sees how you've grown. But don't forget the pain she caused you. You need to safeguard your own peace, Mike. His words resonated. I didn't want to be pulled into her emotional chaos again, but I also didn't want to be the kind of person who held on to resentment. It was a delicate balance, and I had to tread carefully. Over the next few days, I decided to process my feelings through writing. I journaled about my emotions, the impact of Sarah's betrayal, and the joy I felt in my newfound freedom. Each entry was cathartic, a release that helped me clarify my thoughts. I realized that while I had moved on, I still needed to seal the wounds from our past. I reflected on the life I had built in her absence, the friendships I had rekindled, the new passions I had discovered, and the community I was creating through my podcast. I began to see how Sarah's actions had pushed me to become a better version of myself. I had turned my pain into purpose, and I was thriving without her. However, as I continued to think about Sarah, I felt a sense of compassion for her. I understood that she was likely struggling with her own demons, and while that didn't excuse what she had done, it did remind me that we were both human, flawed, and imperfect. Perhaps this was an opportunity for closure, a chance to have a final conversation that could bring me peace. I decided to respond to her message, but with clear boundaries. Sarah, I appreciate your kind words, but I need you to understand that I've moved on. I'm happy with my life now, and I can't go back to what we had. I wish you the best, but I need to focus on my future. After sending the message, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I wasn't inviting her back into my life, but I was acknowledging her presence in a way that honored my healing. I was ready to let go of the past finally. In the days that followed, I focused on my podcast and continued to explore new adventures. One weekend, I decided to take a road trip to a nearby national park. I packed my car with hiking gear, snacks, and my trusty journal, excited to immerse myself in nature and reflect on my journey. The drive was invigorating, the scenery shifting from urban landscapes to sprawling fields and towering trees. As I hiked through the trails, I felt a sense of connection to the earth. Each step on the rugged terrain was a reminder of how far I had come. I sat on a rock overlooking a breathtaking view of the mountains, the sun setting in the distance, casting a golden hue across the landscape. In that moment of solitude, I allowed myself to feel the weight of my journey. I thought about the pain of betrayal and how it had shaped me into someone more resilient. I was no longer the man who had allowed Sarah's choices to dictate my happiness. I had carved my own path, and I was proud of who I had become. As I sat there, I opened my journal and began to write. I poured my thoughts onto the page, not just about my experiences with Sarah, but about the growth I had achieved since then. The stories I wanted to tell, the dreams I still had yet to chase, and the people I wanted to connect with. I felt a shift occurring within me, as if I was shedding the remnants of my past like an old skin, ready to embrace the next chapter. When I returned home from the trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was ready for something more. The podcast had become a significant part of my life, but I wanted to expand my reach. I began brainstorming ideas for workshops and speaking engagements, wanting to create interactive experiences for people looking to reclaim their stories. I reached out to local community centers and universities, pitching my ideas and finding receptive audiences. The more I put myself out there, the more I realized that I had found my calling. I wanted to help others navigate their own journeys of healing and transformation. Yet, just as I was laying the groundwork for my new ventures, another message from Sarah appeared on my phone. This time, it felt different. She wrote, "I know I hurt you and I can't change that, but I want to be honest. I've been in contact with Jason again, and I'm realizing I can't keep running from my mistakes. I need to face the consequences of my actions, and I want to apologize properly." Reading her words, I felt a mix of compassion and resolve. While I didn't want to be dragged back into her struggles, I was also proud of her for recognizing the need to confront her past. This was a pivotal moment for both of us. I decided to take the opportunity to close the chapter on our relationship once and for all. I replied to her message, keeping it simple and sincere. "Sarah, I appreciate your honesty. It's important for both of us to face our pasts. I hope you find the strength to confront your mistakes and grow from them. I wish you well, but I need to continue focusing on my life." As I hit send, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had finally severed the emotional ties that had bound us, allowing me to fully embrace my future. The healing journey was still ongoing, but I had taken significant strides toward reclaiming my narrative. With newfound clarity, I focused on expanding my podcast, planning workshops, and connecting with others who had faced similar struggles. I was becoming a voice of hope, and in doing so, I found purpose in my pain. I was ready to continue forging ahead, knowing that each step forward was a testament to my growth, resilience, and the life I was building beyond the shadows of betrayal. With the emotional ties to Sarah finally severed, I felt lighter than I had in years. The clouds of betrayal that had haunted me began to dissipate, revealing a clear sky filled with endless possibilities. I threw myself into expanding my podcast and planning my workshops with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in a long time. The journey of self-discovery had become my driving force, and I was ready to share it with the world. I spent countless hours crafting new content, inviting guests with inspiring stories of their own transformations. Each episode became a platform for connection, allowing people to share their experiences of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately, healing. I reveled in the feedback, learning that my story resonated with many who were navigating their own challenges. I received messages from listeners who thanked me for opening up about my journey, who shared that my words had given them hope during their darkest times. In the midst of this newfound purpose, I organized my first workshop, inviting participants to explore their own narratives and guide them on their paths to healing. The event was held in a cozy community center, and as people began to fill the room, I felt a surge of excitement and anxiety. I had prepared for this moment, but the reality of standing in front of a group of eager faces was exhilarating. When the time came to speak, I took a deep breath and shared my story. I talked about the pain of betrayal, the process of healing, and how I had transformed my experiences into something meaningful. I shared my journey of rediscovering my identity and the power of reclaiming one's narrative. As I spoke, I saw nods of understanding and empathy from the crowd. It was a beautiful moment of connection that reminded me we were all in this together. After my presentation, I opened the floor for discussion. People began sharing their own stories, their struggles with betrayal and heartache, and their desire to move forward. I listened intently as they spoke, offering support and guidance where I could. It was a powerful exchange of vulnerability and strength, and I felt honored to facilitate such an important conversation. As the workshop came to a close, participants expressed their gratitude, many of them visibly moved by the experience. I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me, realizing that I had created a safe space for others to heal. This was what I had been searching for, a way to turn my pain into purpose, to help others navigate their own journeys. In the weeks that followed, I continued to hold workshops and expand my podcast's reach. I collaborated with local therapists and life coaches, incorporating their expertise into my content. I also started to connect with people outside my immediate circle, networking with others in the personal development space. The more I shared my story, the more I found a community of like-minded individuals who were passionate about growth and healing. Yet, as life continued to flourish, I also found moments of reflection creeping in. I thought about Sarah. Occasionally, but rather than feeling anger or resentment, I felt a sense of distance and compassion. I had grown significantly since our split, and it was clear that we were on different paths. I hoped she could find her way to healing just as I had, but it was no longer my responsibility to carry the weight of her choices. One evening, as I was preparing for a podcast episode, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Sarah. My heart raced, but I took a deep breath before opening it. "Mike, I wanted to let you know that I've been working on myself. I'm in therapy, and I'm committed to making changes in my life. I hope you're doing well." I paused, feeling an odd mix of emotions. This was the first time she had reached out without begging for forgiveness or trying to draw me back into her life. It felt like a genuine acknowledgement of her journey, and I appreciated the honesty. I realized that while we had shared a significant chapter in our lives, we were now on vastly different paths. I composed a thoughtful response. "I appreciate you reaching out, Sarah. I'm glad to hear that you're working on yourself. I'm doing well and focusing on my own journey. I wish you the best." Hitting send felt liberating. It was a clear boundary, but it also conveyed a sense of closure. I had moved on, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next without the shadow of our past weighing me down. As summer turned to fall, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had taken. The emotional roller coaster of betrayal had led me to discover my inner strength, creativity, and resilience. I was no longer defined by my past. I had learned to embrace my story and use it as a catalyst for personal growth. With my podcast gaining momentum and my workshops growing in popularity, I felt a sense of purpose that I had never experienced before. I had turned my pain into a platform for healing, not just for myself, but for countless others seeking guidance and inspiration. In those quiet moments of reflection, I understood that life would always have its challenges, but I was no longer afraid of facing them alone. I had discovered the power of vulnerability and the strength of community. I was ready to embrace the future with open arms, ready to write the next chapter of my life, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a man who had transformed his pain into purpose. As I looked ahead, I felt a rush of excitement. This was just the beginning of my journey, and I was eager to see where it would take me. I had reclaimed my story, and it was one of resilience, hope, and unyielding strength. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it fully.